that's the question that keeps coming up, is, well, how do we undermine thoughts? How do we get to the point where we just see thoughts as just, you know, just smoke rings?
Yeah. Which is, it's such a bizarre question too, because it's what is noticing it but another thought, right?
Huh.
It is thoughts all the way down. Our our entire experience is basically one giant thought, recognizing other thoughts of different substances.
Yeah, and it's not an actual exact thought in words necessarily,
Yeah.
but it is a form of thought because there is a recognition of, even if we don't say the word to ourselves in our head, there's a recognition that this is a thought, and then
Yeah.
all the associations that come with it. So yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't noticed that before, that it may not be verbalized in language as like a voice heard in the head, but it is a thought that is in the process of recognizing that that's a thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Our entire experience of the world is in effect mind generated, right? We're
Hmm.
not, again, there's no like little Darrell sitting behind the windows of eyes looking out at this real world exactly as it is. Like it is all a mind generated illusion. So
Hmm.
that being the case, it's very hard to distinguish which parts are uh, thought from what is, actually real. Fundamentally, we don't have access to anything that is real. So we could say that every single part of our experience is a thought. The question is how reliable some of them are and
Uh,
which ways some of them are displaying. So we do distinguish between when I have a relatively silent thinking mind, meaning there's no like verbalized thoughts running and there's no visual thoughts running, or at least not overt ones, but maybe something more subtle. Um, there seems to be quietness, but we often run into the mistake of believing now I'm seeing the world as it really is. But even what you are seeing, when your mind is quiet and it's not running those verbal or other types of thoughts, that's still a thought. What you're seeing is still mind generated. What you're seeing is effectively still a thought, always. It doesn't have that secondary layer of removal, like base, let's say it like this. What people talk about, especially in sort of non-dual circles, where they're talking about, just resting in awareness or just being aware or presence or whatever that fundamental layer of conscious awareness is, it's still mind generated. It's still a thought. It's still being aware as a thought. You're not seeing the actual world from some vantage point outside of the body, from some, really pure interaction with matter as it exists. You are still interacting with the world through the intermediary of the mind, which is creating thought. Those extra thoughts that come up in whatever way they do, depending on whether we're visual thinkers, auditory thinkers, or other types of thinkers, those are sort of secondary. We, those are not even necessarily necessary for the functioning of the system as
you're
we
right.
currently think of it, right? There are people who have relatively completely quiet inner mental spaces, yet there's still the same processing that goes on. It's just not experienced or projected in the same ways as those of us who have internal monologues or internal visual fields. Um, Again, people with anauralia and aphantasia have completely silent minds in some regards in comparison, but they experience thought in a different way, and the thinking is still going on subconsciously. So it's not so much a matter of even recognizing the unreality or the smoke ring nature of certain types of thoughts. It's really more important to recognize that the entire facade of our experience is mind generated and thus effectively not really reputable. We can't
Hmm.
we can't rely on any of it as being completely truthful because it's all the mind's projection. So that experience, which wants to be free from being caught in the delusion of mind, is itself part of the delusion of mind. That, right?
Hmm.
That character who believes that it can see through the belief in the mind stories and stop being attached to and associated with those is just one more fabrication of the mind as it's generating all of this.
Huh. We talk about no self and there not being someone there.
Yeah.
And, to all of us who've had that moment of clear seeing where we see that there truly isn't some sort of central agent,
Yeah.
for most of us, after that moment, there is still this more subtle version of that, this subtle idea of somehow there is some kind of receiver,
Yeah.
some kind of witness. And well, how do we see through thoughts? There's not an I in that sentence, but it still is implying an I because who is it that can see through thoughts? And so what we're
Yeah.
talking about is really a system that is layer upon layer of interlocking functioning. And it's all happening in the brain. It's all generated there. And all that is happening is it's very it's don't know how to get around this word. It's self-referential in that it's referring to the neurological system,
Yeah.
not a someone, not an anyone. It's
Yeah.
just referring to the neurological functioning, which is insanely complex, and I don't think we'll ever map all of it.
No. Mm.
Um, and seeing through self, it seems like for it to really happen in its fullness needs to be a deep down in the belly understanding that there truly isn't an anyone or a someone or anything at all. There's an absolute zero, nothing other than just processing that believes it has a name.
Yeah. I love that. I love that phrasing. Yeah, absolutely. Processing that believes it has a name. That's
Hmm.
exactly. That's great. Exactly. And even that processing, when it recognizes that, is still the processing.
Hmm.
There's no escaping it. I say in the book multiple times, there's no, we have this idea that like we're lost in the matrix of the mind and we are somehow going to escape it. But this is this thing which is, trying to escape it is just part of it's a creation of the matrix. There's nowhere for it to escape to. It is
Yeah.
it is everything. It is creating its entire world for itself. And there's nothing outside of it to which it could escape to.
And so the best you can do is to work consistently, persistently towards a neutrality, an accepting neutrality, which I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's how it seems, an accepting neutrality towards all of the mind's fabrications, all of the mental pictures, all of the feelings, all of the sounds, all of the anything that impinges on the nervous system, whether from outside
Yep.
or inside.
Yep.
Getting that accepting neutrality towards all of it and recognizing it that is absolutely, totally, wholly, in its entirety, impersonal.
Yeah.
That processing doesn't have an address, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that recognition that even when all of this happens, when we're as, you know, free and conscious of being, nothing and no one and everything is connected and all of that, that's still just part of the same system doing
Yeah.
its thing. It's still all part of that same game. That there's no way to escape from it, and there is no one who needs to escape from it because it's all the same system. It's all the same mind created thing. I think the best that we can do is, and what we're really doing is working to retrain the system to be less uh, self-problematic. Causes less suffering for itself. In doing so, it causes less suffering for those who it interacts with.
Hmm.
And that's kind of our best thing because anything that we hold onto a pedestal of it being some truth about the experience or the way it is, like, and this is why I'm even reluctant when we talk about the idea that, like, truly seeing through the self and then having none of that like subtle attachment to a thread of the one who is seeing through the self or any of that you referred to. There are experiences that you can have where you lose like all sense of centrality or all sense of, being attached to a body or anything else. There is really persuasive evidence right now that we know largely which regions of the brain are implicated in those kinds of situations.
Hmm.
Now, the question is, what do we make out of those experiences? If those experiences are being taken as the pinnacle, that we're really aiming to become completely dissociated from the body and all of our experiences and have this other way of being, that's fine, but recognize also that there are a lot of downsides to that when working in living in the society that we do.
Hmm.
And that it sounds like it's not really a spiritual thing as the way, most traditions have proposed it for thousands of years,
Right.
but it's mostly biological. We can kind of
Yeah.
turn these things on and off. People can have brain injuries that induce exactly the same kinds of states. These things are replicatable. So that being the case, I think what we really need to be aware of is how much is enough when we're talking about awakening.
Mm.
And just because we can completely turn off certain regions of the brain, which then make it very difficult to live in society and drive a car and do other things, is it really useful? Where are we drawing the lines of what like useful awakening actually is compared
Mm.
to, just brain damage? And I'm not sure that collectively we know enough about the workings yet, or that enough research has been done in this case, and certainly it hasn't become part of the overall discussion enough to where we've decided that. But I think it's a relevant thing for everybody to start kind of considering, especially when we're talking about the more, extreme sides of the awakening experience. If they're temporary, then great, that's fine. You can derive a lot of insight from that. But there are people who have experienced things which are really kind of debilitating from really trying to push so far into effectively, turning off certain parts of the brain. And then kind of finding like new ways to, the brain has to kind of find new ways to integrate and come back online to something that's still functional. And so I think like we're kind of in the process of finding what is reasonable, considering that none of it is a person or a soul or an individual who is doing these things. Who is deriving the benefit from the practice. I think for too long we've had very mm, dogmatic ideas
Hmm.
about, you know, everything has to fit in this particular box and look a certain way. And what we're really finding, because everybody is so much more engaged now and able to share experiences, that things don't really follow that kind of a map and things don't look the same for everybody. And um, I think there's some really base level of reality understandings that we can come to now, both through practice and through education, in terms of the things we've been talking about, to really recognize that, there is no processing which isn't done by the machine. There's no existence which isn't part of the mind generation of existence. So if that's the case, then, you know, yeah, how much does that mind want to interfere with its own functioning? How much is too much? What is just the right amount? How much suffering is acceptable and how much isn't? And this is really a case by case, person by person, system by system. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense.